Word Wizards! I cannot tell you how excited I am to have our guest today, Sarah M. Eden, the woman, the myth, the legend. She's agreed to come on with us. She's an expert in historical romances. She's had a lot of experience with trying to juggle multiple projects at once during a year, and just she has a great community that she's a part of, and she also has her own podcast. She's a podcaster herself, so she's a kindred spirit that way, and I'm just really excited to have her come share all the value that I know that she has learned from her experience. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Sarah. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to kind of delve into your mind a little bit about your experiences. But before we take off with all the questions that I would love to ask you, I would love to give you a minute to kind of introduce yourself to the audience. Your journey has been probably not everything expected, right? But it's been a long and good one, and I'd love to hear kind of how that started.
Yeah, I think the longer you're in this industry, the more you realize that longevity is way more important than ease on the journey because there are always going to be ups and downs. I'm one of those strange authors who didn't start out wanting to be an author. It didn't even cross my mind. I'd always assumed authors had to be like really special, unique, interesting, different people, and I always felt just kind of pretty ordinary. So my journey toward being an author started on a dare, which I don't know of anyone else who got started that
Yeah,
way.
that's new.
Right. It's odd. I was at my mom's house. I was at this point, I was married. I had two kids. My youngest was maybe about a year old. I had just been to the library and was just struggling to find a book that kind of hit that sweet spot for me that was just, doing what I wanted a book to do. And not that I hadn't enjoyed the ones I was reading, there just was something missing. And I
Mhm.
fully expected my mom, because I was complaining to her about this, to be very empathetic and tell me how hard my life was and make me feel better. And instead, she said, well, if you can't find the book you want to read, maybe you should write one. And I was just an offhand comment. I've asked her in the years since, and she has no memory of this conversation. But I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to do it. You watch, I'm going to do it. I took it as an actual challenge. And I spent about the next 18 months reading everything I could about how to write books, how to edit books, how to rewrite books. I knew I wanted to write romance because that's what I lean toward anyway. I knew I wanted to write historical because I love studying history. So I also went and read a bunch of historical romances and took notes kind of about how the stories flowed and different story elements and how authors approached it. And then I sat down and wrote a book. And then I kind of rewrote it and edited it. And for Mother's Day, about a year and a half later, I went down to my local print shop, printed it, had it spiral bound, and gave it to my mother for Mother's Day. It just went boom. And
Did
by
it?
that point, I knew I loved it and I wanted to keep doing it. And I have been ever since. So that
Wow.
started me on my journey. Just a
Wow,
dare
challenge
in a
accepted.
random
Yeah,
conversation.
I love that. But you know what? There's a kind of a common occurrence, I think, is that we all love to read. Obviously, that's why we love to write. And there's a lot of us who really do feel like there's just we've read a lot of things, but that one that speaks to our soul isn't there, and that's the calling, right? That's the calling. I have a story
Exactly.
to share, and I know the elements that I want in it, and I know that if
Mm-hmm.
I would enjoy it, someone else would. And in fact, the
Right.
last episode that I just had with Brett, we were talking about how if you write for the masses, it's not a good book, but if you write for one person, that's what resonates. And so if you're writing for yourself as a reader, that's not
Right.
necessarily a bad thing. You have the
Exactly.
same emotional connections as everybody else. And I think that's really
Right.
cool. And glad that you took the dare because now we have a lovely series from Sarah M. Eden and more projects upcoming. So
It
good
also
thing
means when I'm
you did
really
it.
frustrated with my career choice, I can text my mom and say, thanks a lot. And she just laughs.
This is all your fault, Mom. You started
Exactly. You
this.
did this.
That's great. That is so great. And I mean, you already mentioned that you're historical and romantic, which I hold out for the romance, so of course I'm for that. But they're quite swoon-worthy, but they're also informative about the era that it was written in. And I just am curious, where do you clearly love what you do now. Where do you get inspiration for so many different storylines, particularly? Because if you're writing in the same era and you have so many of them, sometimes things tend to feel like they're overlapping. So where do you keep your originality from?
Right. I love just reading and studying about history just for fun because I'm kind of weird like that. But I found there are endless ideas just in studying the lives of actual people. And I don't write fiction based on real people's experiences, but like I've read about soldiers who fought in the Battle of Waterloo and just taking some of those experiences. And I have a soldier in one of my books who did, and reading about people who lived in different areas of the world and what they experienced. I also look into my own family history. I have a whole series of books that is inspired by some of the experiences that my family had as unwanted immigrants in this country in the 1800s.
Wow.
So that informs it as well. I feel like there are as many stories as there are people, and there are endless numbers of people. So I will pick a time and a place and look at what was happening in the world at that time in that location, and then imagine a character of my own creating in that situation. How would they react? How would it impact them? And from unique characters grow unique stories. So that's really where I start, is by making my characters as realistic, as interesting, as unique as I can, and knowing the time and place they live in. And where those two converge is where you find really great stories.
Hmm. From unique characters come unique stories. That's what I'm writing down right now. That's I already got a flat quote, and we're not even like in the first 10 minutes of the.
Woohoo!
Yes, crushed it. That's amazing. And uh something to consider because I think we get kind of bogged down by, I mean, I know I do as a writer, and I've talked to others who feel the same way. Everything's been told, it feels like. And
Yeah.
so you're
Mhm.
like, what right do I have to spend all this time trying to force my story, to you? But it's not about that, right? It's about your unique characters and how they respond. And I think it's about a reflection of who you want to be, and you compare yourself with these characters, and it really shapes your paradigm. So it's awesome. With with your many books, which when I say she has many books, I mean she has like over two series, okay, and several within each series.
Yeah.
You've been through the process of manuscript to publication plenty of times, and it's sometimes several times in a year. And I would love to ask, what kind of advice would you give to those kind of starting out the career process, or maybe even who've just sealed, their first contract? What have you found from that translation from manuscript to published work?
I think one of the things that shifts that we don't expect is when we're writing, and we're pre-published, whether we're doing it through a traditional publisher or indie publishing, but we're pre-published, we don't have a book out in the world. You kind of have the freedom to write whatever is speaking to you, whatever kind of comes to your mind. And after you've published, while yes, more doors are being opened, you don't have as much ability to define those doors. You
Mm,
have readers who have expectations. You have publishers, if you're traditionally published, who have expectations. Maybe you have opened up a world you're hoping will become an interconnected series. Well, now you have made this promise to your readers. You got to know these characters. I'm going to come back to them. And suddenly you're juggling a lot more than just the story that's like resting on your heart.
mm,
And when I first started writing and publishing, that became kind of a tough thing because you can start to feel a little bit boxed in. So one thing that I've found in doing that, whenever I'm starting a new story, even if it maybe isn't the one I would have picked next, maybe my brain is really pulling towards something else. As I am working out the details of that story, kind of what it's going to be about. I'm a planner, so I plan a lot ahead. You could even do this if you are a pantser and you love to jump in. I will write down something about that story that I am super, super excited about.
mm,
And it's very different from project to project, but by reminding myself why I'm going to love this story, what is going to be great about it, something that the creative part of my mind can be really excited about, then even if maybe I felt a little bit like it was chosen for me, from that point forward, I am choosing it because I'm excited
mm,
about it, because there's something in it that speaks to me. That helps me when I'm on deadline or where I'm writing something that maybe I wouldn't have chosen next. And then I always try to weave into my projects each year something that is different and new, that isn't connected to any expectation. Sometimes it never gets published, but it allows me to still have that creative freedom that you sometimes miss as you're moving down the
mm.
road. And that has helped a lot when I've felt stuck. It's helped when I feel kind of bogged down. Sometimes you feel like you're only writing for others and not for yourself. And those are all very good reminders that even a project that has been scheduled for you can be one you love if you remind yourself what you love about it.
Mm.
So I've done that for years and years, and it's working so far. So
Yeah.
fingers
Oh,
crossed.
yeah. I'd say you certainly have had the experience for it. And I love that you say you choose it, right? You choose the project. Even though they gave it to you, you have to have that kind of talk with it and say, no, I'm picking you and making you my own. And
Yes.
and sometimes it's not so much, I guess, what it's about, it's how you do it, right? It's like your creative flair putting it on that. So that's
Right.
I love that. I love that idea. It's hard to work creatively under deadlines. I can speak from experience. It puts a lot of
Yes.
pressure on it and it feels like you can't just get that flow resonating. So I love that you remind yourself why you love what you do,
Hmm.
especially with projects you didn't expect, because that's so important with
Right.
keeping your creativity going. Do you have like a daily regime that you go through? Like, do you write creatively outside of your projects, every day? Is there like, yeah, what does your schedule kind of look like with when you're juggling these projects?
Yeah, I don't have kids at home anymore. They're both grown up and gone. Excuse me, which has changed the way I approach my days. When they were still at home, it was
Mm,
everything was them until I got them to school. And then I would write until they were home. And then, so my days were kind of broken up that way. But now I basically treat this as a regular everyday job. I'm at my computer by 9. I work until 5. I give myself a lunch break. What that looks like every day can change depending on what's on my docket. When you become a career author, you really are not just a writer, you're also running a small business. And
mm,
so there's a lot of businessy type stuff that I really didn't expect when I first started writing. You're nodding. I know you get this. Yeah.
I
Running a small business is so time consuming. People have asked me which class in college was the most helpful for me as a writer, because I didn't major in like creative writing or English. And I tell them
mm,
hands down it was accounting, which always surprises people, but it's because
mm,
you really are running a business, and knowing how to do that is really helpful. So I make a list of things that need to be done that day. For me, because my creative juices flow better in the afternoon than in the morning, I tend to spend my morning doing writing emails, paying bills, scheduling posts, that kind of thing, because they're just the more checklist type things. And by
mm,
the time that's done, you kind of have that feeling of relief. I got done the things that had to be. Now I can kind of lean into the creative part of it.
mhm,
um, Again, what that looks like from day to day changes. Sometimes I'm editing, sometimes I'm writing, sometimes I'm researching, but I try to put in regular hours every day. There's some days when the creative juices never come, but there's always businessy stuff to do. So I lean back into that and fill my days that way.
mm, mm. This is so pertinent to the show too, because I split my time halfway between creatives and business writers, and I think sometimes they're like, "Why are we talking about business?" It's just so integral.
It
From what
is.
I've learned, and I'm talking about experts. I'm not talking about my own experience, but even with work, translating, it's all creative. You all have to creatively come find ways to market yourself, and
Absolutely.
and that's actually one of the questions that I had listed here that I wanted to ask you without, delving too much into your personal business details. Is there something that you're doing currently to market yourself that's working well as an author for you?
Some
Platform or
advice that I tend to give authors, because we talk about one of the ways that authors can get their name out there and get known is through social media. But social media is such a potential time suck, and
Mm,
it's so often difficult to predict.
yes.
So authors can have a hard time knowing what to do. So say, well, I look at this author and they're doing this, but that didn't work for me. And I look at this author and they're doing this. So something that I tell authors when looking at your social media, what your social media needs to be offering your readers is something they can't get in other places. Your
Mm,
publisher is going to post about your books, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Um, Other reviewers are going to post reviews about your books. Stores that are carrying them might post about them. Now, of course, you do have to talk about your books that are coming out and make sure that you're letting people know about that. But the one thing that you can give to readers that no one else can is you.
mm,
Um, and readers who feel like when they go on an author's social media page, they're getting to know the author, they're getting to know that person, feel a connection that they won't otherwise, because they
mm.
can't find it anywhere else. And this doesn't mean you lay your soul bare in front of them every single time you post, But to me, that's why it's so crucial that we be authentic on social media. Find
Mm,
the things that fit you as a person, the things you enjoy doing, the things you enjoy sharing, and lean into that. It may not be the most polished account that anyone will see. It may not do all the same things that these big, huge, big name authors are doing, but it's you. What you're saying is, this is who I am. Um, this is how I connect back to my books. This is how I connect to my life. This is how I can connect to you.
mm,
And when they get to know you, it's not just about a book. It's not just about a series. They've come to know you. And that connection keeps people coming back because we read books not only to enjoy stories but to connect to characters. There is a human need that drives us in ways we don't always acknowledge to connect to other people. So when you write books that have these great characters going through things, your readers connect to your characters. When your social media legitimately and authentically reflects you, then
mm,
readers connect to you, and that's what we really crave, is connection. So that's the advice I give. Some of the best marketing you can do is, in a way, marketing yourself, but it's not marketing. You're literally just being you online. And that has a greater impact than I think we often realize.
mm. I love that. I love that. Audiences know when you're not jiving. They know when you're not
Yes,
interested. And
exactly.
with how much marketing gets shoved at them, you'd think that, there'd be some magic formula to it, but people can genuinely tell if you're not being.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And you don't want to be, as a viewer, you don't want to be wasting your time, and people, you can tell that. So just,
Exactly.
and that immediately makes me think of a bunch of authors that I, follow on social media, or, watch their blogs and things, because I like to learn about them because they authored, some of the characters that I love, and it's so, so true. And I'm
Right.
sure anyone listening would definitely be able to quickly think of, oh, that's totally me with this author. And yeah, it's
Exactly.
important. Maybe just focus less on the polished part, which is something I had to learn to let go of, even with this show, right? Is you can't cut and paste everything that you
Right.
don't want in there, and instead just focus on having a genuine, conversation with your audience, which is
Right.
full of writing.
I remind myself it's very hard to relate to perfection. So
Mm,
if you want people to be able to relate to you and you want to be able to relate to them, you have to let go of that illusion,
mm,
because none of us are perfect and we can sense when someone's trying really hard to be.
mm. Yeah, yeah, I love that. So I'm gonna switch modes here a little bit. I'd love to talk a little bit about your publishing experience. There's always questions about publishing, right? And how much of publishing, from your experience, do you think is connection to someone versus luck? Do you think it's just hitting that query right? Is it business transaction for you that way? What would you say?
Yeah, that's kind of the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Isn't
It's
it?
trying to
Yeah.
figure out what
There's
the
no right answer. Yeah, there's no right
yeah,
answer. I just love to hear
right,
from your
what the
experience.
combination is. I think it's a combination of luck, of course, and knowing people, because sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's you happen to talk to the right person. And by knowing
Mm,
people, I don't mean you're schmoozing people for their connections, but
yeah,
you may have a chance to meet authors at conferences or cross paths with a publisher, wherever it might be. So some of those connections can be helpful.
mm,
um, but I think the bigger part of it that we sometimes overlook is it's also really hard work. And working hard isn't going to guarantee that anything will happen, but all of the luck in the world and all of the connections in the world aren't going to make any difference if you don't have a book. Um,
mm,
you can query at exactly the right time with the right type of project to the right person, but if you haven't written a book that appeals, or a book that's, you haven't put in the time to polish it as well as you can, those connections aren't going to pay off. So
mm,
I feel like as authors, it helps us to remember that the one thing we legitimately can control is what we've written and the time we put into it. So if we emphasize that and make sure we're doing our very best work, that we are doing what we can when we can, while still making the connections we need, while still pursuing opportunities, that's going to give us our best chance for success. Nothing guarantees it in this industry,
mm.
but I think that increases your odds. And so yeah, but it's also helpful to remember that a lot of it is luck. You could have an amazing manuscript, you pitched it to exactly the right person at exactly the right publisher, but it wasn't the right time just because you were unlucky. So um yeah, do what you can, but give yourself grace, because this industry is often very unpredictable.
That's great. That's great advice. That was a hard question that I just posed her. So that was a well done answer. I
Whew.
and it's worth mentioning that you say, well, maybe you were just unlucky. A lot of us are just unlucky in the
Yeah,
queer changes because there's way more authors right now than there are agents and publishers.
exactly.
And especially this year after the pandemic, it's less than it was, right? So keep
Exactly.
pursuing it and write it for that one person. Just keep remembering that
Hmm.
one ideal reader, whether that's your young self or somebody else,
Right.
and say, okay, I'm just gonna give them the best that I got and keep
Yeah,
working on it. That's something I have to remind myself of probably on a week.
exactly. And I think it plays a role in indie publishing too. Did the right people happen to see your book at the right time? Maybe you put money into an
Mm,
Amazon ad and it just didn't quite hit the right people.
yep.
A lot of it is luck, and sometimes we are just horrifically unlucky. And as frustrating as that is, like you said,
Yeah.
I think it also helps to remind ourselves of that, because it helps that lack of luck not turn into overwhelming discouragement.
Mm, mm. Well, thank you for that advice. That's definitely worth taking to heart to those of you who are listening. She's definitely been through a lot and speak from experience. So, we're running a little lower on time now, and I have, of course, a million questions I would still
Of
ask you if
course.
we had time for it. But just a little bit more of like shopkeeping questions is what is something that you think we should be reading right now? What's something that you're reading that you love or that we should make ourselves aware of as writers and as readers?
Oh, goodness. That's quite a question.
Mm,
Um, I read a lot of nonfiction in areas of history and psychology, because they both play a very significant role
mm,
in my writing. One that I read recently, I'm looking over on my shelf so that I can remember what it's called. It's called Dress in the Age of Jane Austen. And it
okay,
is, I
love
mean, it's
that.
got to be this thick. It's a hardback book, and it's all just about the fashion of the cultural Regency era, which is essentially the first 2 decades of the
Mm,
19th century in England. That one's been really, really interesting and fascinating. So that's one
mm,
that's worth checking out, I think. I very recently finished a book by Toni Shiloh. She's fantastic. If you haven't read her, she's a great one to go look into. She writes romance. Hers are contemporary. I don't write contemporary, but I really like to read it. So that's another one I'd suggest. She's fantastic.
lovely. Yeah, I'm definitely putting her on my Goodreads immediately. I'll definitely hold out for that. Contemporary romance and historical romance, though different, are both very charming
Yeah,
and it's really
absolutely.
fun to jump genres. So if you have it, a lot of listeners I know just stick in the historical romance, which I'm not judging you on that because I have
Right.
plenty on my bookshelves behind me. But you might want to try contemporary though, because sometimes you can just get something sweet and a little bit different, and it's a good branch.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Change it up.
yeah, change it up. See what's happening. What can we do to get more of Sarah M. Eden in our lives? Where can we go?
I am online at sarahmeden.com. I am on Instagram, Sarah_M_Eden, Facebook, Sarah M. Eden. I'm around.
Yep, she's making herself available as an author, like we've talked about. And you said you have this will be released in September here. We've got a special project coming up.
Yes,
I don't know how much
absolutely.
details you want to divulge, but I'll give you a minute to tease it at least.
Yeah, well, I will tell you all about it. I think one of the questions authors get asked a lot, besides where do you get your ideas and how do you get published, is have you ever thought about making your book into a movie? Which is
Mm,
hilarious because authors are like, of course I've thought
you
about
have
it.
no control.
Very seldom happens, right? So
Yeah.
I got to announce on September 19th that there's going to be a movie made of one of my books, which I'm excited about. It is this one right here, Seeking
Oh,
Persephone, which I'm really,
that
really
is
excited about.
my top five. I'm so
Right.
excited for that. That's gonna
And
be so
I'm
fun.
quadruply excited about it because often when books are going to be made into movies, once the options are sold, meaning that whoever's making the movie can make it, the author is no longer part of the process anymore,
Mm-mm,
which is
mm-mm.
why authors get nervous when books are made into movies, and so do readers. But I actually am fully and completely attached to this project. I'm one of the executive producers. I am the one of the screenwriter. Well, I'm not doing the screenwriting, but I have full script approval. I've been part of the casting process. I'm fully, deeply, and totally entrenched in this. So I got to choose our Adam. I got to choose our Persephone. We're in the process of gathering up all the rest as well. So on the 19th, we announced this. It is not being done through one of the traditional studios, which has been great, both because it gives us so much creative freedom, but it also has allowed us to move forward, even with all that is going on in Hollywood right now. And we announced that we're doing a Kickstarter just to help boost that budget a little bit, since we don't have the studio budget. But that runs September 19th through October 19th. There are amazing rewards connected to it, some great opportunities, and we have every hope, expectation of filming early next year. So if you
Oh,
haven't hopped over and peeked at that, please do. If not, or maybe you have, cheer us on. This is really exciting.
this
And the
is
hope is, if
huge.
this movie does as well as we think it will, we want to do the entire Lancaster series. So
Oh,
it's going to be
and we would
fabulous.
love that. Okay, if you're a fan of Sarah M. Eden, well, first off, if you're not, you need to become a fan. So, second off,
We recommend it.
highly recommended from the two of us. Second off, this is an opportunity for viewers and readers that does not come because most of the time you're like, when are they gonna make a movie? When are they gonna make a movie? And sometimes people, will rally behind a new social media account that's basically a million signatures saying, you need to get this movie out. There's a fan club for it. There's literally an opportunity for you to support this show happening. Like you can
Right.
contribute as a fan into getting to see one of your favorite books put into film. And that's not something I think I've ever heard of. So
Yeah.
get on this, like pay attention to the
We're really excited.
project dates and help her, make this a reality. And the fact that she gets to oversee it means that, there's going
Yes.
to be a lot of similarities there and crossovers. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, take this opportunity, take the chance. We'll have links shared, of course, in the podcast notes. So check out the show notes and see where you can go. But that's so exciting!
Yay.
Congratulations!
Yeah, it's been
It's
years in the
amazing.
making. So it's exciting
Oh,
that it's finally moving forward.
yeah, that's going to be great. I don't know that there's a better mic drop than that as we conclude our episode, but just thanks so much for coming on. We're recording this, during kind of a busy time of life, and she jumped on with us and was willing to schedule from her busy schedule. So we appreciate it. You've been lovely, and we'll have you
This
stick
has been
around here
great.
for a minute. Good, I'm glad. But for those of you listening, let this be inspiration to you as readers and writers, and always remember to write on.